All right, all right. We are back at the podcast today. We have a special guest with us from Wisconsin. We have Chris Tiffany from Sprinter IT. Welcome, Chris. How are you today?
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you having me on. I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Everything is great. It's sunny day here, so we're happy in New Jersey. We have not been out to Wisconsin yet, so it's great to add another mark on the state list of where we've done podcasts. So you and I first got
Fantastic.
introduced by a Facebook group, IT, an IT Facebook group, and connected through there. And you have a pretty interesting story, so I kind of wanted to get right into it. So,
For sure.
how long have you been doing this?
Yeah, so I started this about 15 years ago this last March. So it's been a long, very fast, wild ride, you know?
You know what's interesting? They say that 75% of businesses that have been open 15 years close. So you've surpassed that milestone.
Well, let's hope we make it to the 20-year mark. So that's the
There's another
plan,
5% that usually fall out in that 15 to 20. My company turned 15 this year too in April. So
Oh, congratulations.
thank you. And I saw that stat as I was thinking about growing, continuing to go at 15 years, and I saw that
Right.
fun fact. So here we are. So you started
Absolutely.
really kind of right out of at 18 years old.
Yeah. So I was homeschooled K through 12, moved all over the Midwest, Wisconsin and Montana, second oldest of six kids, and never had a computer growing up, anything like that. Got one when I was about 14. The family got an old hand me down, and then I graduated high school when I was 16. Started community college and started doing some computer repairs, etc., for fellow classmates, professors, whatnot like that. And my dad owned a very small one trucking company, so I grew up kind of in that entrepreneur, self-employed world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wasn't afraid to, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I might as well do it right. So turned 18 on the 27th, and 31st had the DBA filed, and got insurance from State Farm, and that drained the last $250 out of $300 I had in my bank account as a 18-year-old kid. And the rest is history, as they might say.
And you were off to the races. So
Pretty much.
that's pretty funny. 18 years old. And why did you graduate school early? Were you just that good at school, or is it because you were homeschooled and you just they got you ahead a little bit?
Yeah, so I mean, definitely a little bit ahead. And then also we had moved in kind of at a certain point. It was either I had to maybe go to private school or public school for a few final things or something. So my parents told me, hey, if you take your ACT, score good enough on it, like you can just go. My older sister was in college. You can go to college with her, and took the ACTs. I think I got like a 25 or 27, something like that on it, which is well above the national average and plenty to get me into college. Took the placement tests. I was pretty much a straight A in college and went there for 2 years, dropped out because I was going for business and IT. And well, I had an IT business that was starting to get busy. So, dealing with Fortune 1000 companies these days, and nobody doesn't hire me for not having a degree. So here we are.
Totally, totally. And that's great. And you took this little business with the last $250, $300 out of your bank account to now having 50 employees.
Yeah. It's been an interesting ride. Just a quick little history, if you will. Trip down memory lane. I started. It was hard to get commercial clients at 18. So we had a couple small business customers. One of them that is still a customer to this day. Country Fresh Meats up here in Weston, and a couple of other ones. And then also got involved in kind of the subcontracting world because companies on the other side of the screen don't know who you are and don't care about how old you are. So all they
Mm-hmm.
care about is reviews. So I did a lot of work for IBM, InfoPrint, a lot of commercial printing, which fit really well with my background growing up in the trucking, transportation, diesel mechanic world. I knew my way around, physical tools. And so rebuilding printers and doing all the maintenance on those bigger units was really easy. And so kind of grew that end, kept growing with that, ended up opening offices about 9 months later. Because I actually had offices before I moved out of my parents' house because it would have made more sense.
Yeah.
And then I had retail stores. At one point, we were up to about 4 retail stores, all in the cell phone electronics repair game. Still had commercial, bought out a one-man MSP, gosh, I think 7 years ago now. He actually was not a part of the company for a few years, and now he's back in as our VCIO. So that's kind of a cool thing when you buy a company out, and then years later they come back in as an employee. You're doing something right. So kind of about 2021, so about 3 years ago or so, I exited the retail side completely, sold off my last retail store to my manager of that store, and have focused just on commercial since then. So it's been kind of a bigger push then. I think when we sold that off, we were at about 15 to 20 employees or so. And now, we're about right around the 50 employee mark. So the last 4 years has really gone quite the roller coaster. Went from 2 million in 2020 to 10 million in 2023. So it's a bit of an uphill climb there.
Sure. And I mean, how did you see that kind of growth? Like that's very impressive growth. And at a time when a lot of businesses are struggling, kind of tell us how you did it.
Yes, I mean, just looking at the last few years there, and it is definitely not all sunshine and roses. And I'm sure there's plenty of companies that are $2 million companies that take home more money than I do. So for those listening and watching, gross numbers is vanity, as they say. I mean, there's been always the challenges early on. When I opened my second retail store, we had a couple of employees quit for not really work related reasons, but just life, whatever, and it left us pretty high and dry. So I had 2 retail stores trying to cover with 2 people, and that doesn't go well. And so long story short, we ended up in a situation where we, had to either pay the employees or pay the taxes. And the employees got paid. We ended up, I don't know, 30 grand behind in rent, something like that. To one of my locations, it was like $3,600 a month rent. And so that wasn't fun. Ended up in a pretty rough spot where, long story short, at the end of the day, by the time we paid the state and fed off, it was about $250,000 that we ended up paying off to them on about 90,000 or so in total, like actual taxes owed, because they had all the interest and penalties and everything else. And so that took a few years, because ultimately, you can't write that size of a check when you're a 500,000 or even $1 million company, typically, especially not in the retail world where margins are pretty slim. And so, I remember days where, the state or the Fed guys were knocking on the door saying, hey, like, you owe this, and they wouldn't settle out because they're like, your lifetime earning potential is above what you owe. So they won't settle. But they wanted to go on, payment plans of like 10 grand a month or whatever. And I was like, there's no way I can commit to that. And I remember I told the good guy is in my little office for my commercial side. I was like, hey, look, the only way this is going to end up working, I've got to be able to build a multi-million-dollar company that can afford to write 6-figure checks. And if you're patient with me, like, you're going to get paid, but you got to give me the time to build this. And thankfully, never got the doors shuttered, nothing like that. Got them enough money, kept things rolling, got that monkey off the back 3-4 years ago now. And, we've been current for the last 10 plus years in taxes, because once that happened, you said never again. They get paid first, Sure. But that was definitely a challenge and a learning experience, for sure. And that's just, one of the dozens of stories I'm sure I could discuss on that front. But I always joke that, even a business owner, if you don't owe the tax man something at some point in time. So I don't recommend other people doing that.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
When I look back on it, people are like, oh, you should have never done that, whatever. And I'm like, sure. But ultimately, like, it's also what kept the doors open and what kept us and got us here, and learned a lot of lessons along the way. And there were some other issues along the way on that. We had some bad accounting teams. We went with a cheaper accounting firm that claimed they were filing stuff that turns out they weren't. Like, there's a whole drama story to it. But ultimately, it was, it was a costly lesson, and it was a costly thing. But, there's a positive outcome to it as well. Like, we're here, we've grown past that, learned a lot of lessons. And, if I just closed up the shop at the first tough time, and said, nope, okay, I'm out of business, I'm going to work for somebody, whatever else, we wouldn't be here. The number of employees we have, the number of families that are fed, the impact we made on our customers and clients, and, employees and contractors and vendors around the country wouldn't be here. So I don't have really a lot of regrets on that. I'll be honest. It's one of those things. If I could go back and do it different, sure. But also, you learn from those situations. So
100%. And again, it sounds like you've just superseded 10 times over at this point. And, to have a team of 50 in your world, I mean, that's not an everyday occurrence. Most IT companies are much smaller.
Yeah. No, I mean, and again, a lot of our infrastructure and security side goes to that realm, but even our MSPN, and I'm really proud of the team and the culture we've built. Our core values and mission and vision, and like how we've been able to build that. The impact we've had on so many employees. Last year, I had three of my employees celebrated 10 years with the company last year, which meant a lot to me. That's a lot of my early guys sticking with it for long, and there are a couple of my directors and a lot of other folks have been here for years. One of my very first customers, her son, he was like 7 or 8 at the time. He turned 18 and came to work for me, and he's been here now for probably 5 years, and moved up. And in that time, I was proud of, he's one of our travel techs, 21-year-old kid, something like that, making close to or over 100 grand a year. Like, I was very, very happy to be able to bring a lot of kids and younger folks through our apprenticeship programs, and whether or not they're still with us or moved on to other companies, making good money with really good skill sets, delivering really good quality of service to their customers and to our customers all over the country. So,
and what's your feeling on the quality of service and for your customers?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to the customer experience, and it's a lot more than just is my problem solved. It's about how that problem was solved. If we were able to be ahead of it, in our infrastructure side, we don't typically get brought in ahead of the problem.
No,
we're
never.
When hey, we're moving this location and we kind of forgot about this. But it's about proper planning. It's about execution. It's about the details. The pulling that broom out and vacuum up and cleaning up. On the IT side, proper documentation. Getting everything set up correctly. Standardizations are huge, obviously, and it's about that customer experience. And it's an ongoing battle. I mean, the battle I have continuously to get our invoicing to be more user friendly is a real challenge, especially in the world of PSAs and Kaseya and everybody like that. Like, making your invoices nice and clean and readable and easy to understand, and still work correctly on the back end with thousands of SKUs is a bit of a challenge. And so there's a lot of things like that are definitely still an ongoing fun time.
Sure. I mean, but each day you're trying to make it better.
Absolutely. And I've been honored, literally in the last 3 weeks, 2 weeks even, we've been approached. I think four different M&A opportunities have landed in our lap, not because we're at this point really looking for that. I've acquired a few companies over the years. We had 4 in the last 2 weeks reach out to us to be acquired. And a couple of them are pretty sizable. And, that says something, when we built that reputation, some of them aren't even ones that I have a personal relationship with the owner or anything. And that means a lot too, just, that even competitors and other companies in the area are like, hey, I'm looking to get out, and who do I want to serve my clients and take care of my employees? And for them to say, hey, that's Sprinter. We want Chris and the Sprinter team to be the one to take this over, really means a lot to me as well. And points to some value that we've really built in the marketplace.
And what's the longer term plan at this point? So you've gotten it to 10 mil. What's the next milestone, or what are you thinking about?
Yeah, so I mean, back in 2020, we set the goal I set the goal, and it was a little bit tongue in cheek, but also reality, and we're shooting for it still. Hitting 50 million a year by 2030, with at least 30% of that in recurring. So shooting for about 18 million in recurring, and we're on the way for that. I don't know when that will actually hit it or not, but it's always a situation of every time you double down and move things up, you get there, and that'll come with a number of different divisions, acquisitions, etc. We've got other outside plant construction work we do. We've got some other aspects, so that's not just IT or MSP, but we're doing a big corporate restructure this year to better support multiple lines of business, and our Datacom division is going through a big ERP transition, and there's all kinds of moving parts pieces to get us there. But my personal goal is really to grow the company to $100 million valuation, and at that point, if I look to exit or whatever, I can have the right management team in place. And some people are like, oh, that's a really crazy goal, whatever. I'm like, hey, somebody's got to do it. Plenty of people do it every day. Why not my team? And that's really I think we can deliver what we need to deliver to our people and grow it where we need to grow it. I'm excited to.
How hands on are you at the current level?
So on the datacom and security side, I'm fairly hands-on still. I'm not in the field much anymore. I got married back in 2022 and took a 7-week honeymoon over to Europe and the UK. So I kind of use that as a good break point, because 8 weeks out of the business is you got to have the people running things, or else it won't work.
Yeah.
So I use that as kind of a break point. I'm still usually in the office, traveling around. I'm pretty heavily involved in Entrepreneurs Owner Organization, involved in a couple of other, networking and marketing things. I really try to support my team very well, and still learning every day, Lord knows. So on the MSP and IT side of things, I don't do a lot. My executive VP, Isaiah, manages most of that. But on the datacom side, I still get a decent amount of involvement with some of our bigger clients, coding oversight, engineering oversight, stuff like that. So there's a long ways to go to get me to a point where I'm, solely the visionary and solely out of that aspect. But one step at a time, so we're getting there.
That's great though that you have these these plans, and that you're putting the teams in place to get you there.
You got to start somewhere, and if you don't have a plan, I never was good at plans early on. It was just something that I just didn't really find the value in. And last year or two, I've been really trying to get much better at setting plans, measuring against them, executing against them. And we still got a long ways to go. I'm not going to stand here and be like, hey, I got this figured out, because Lord knows I don't. But
no,
every day 1% better than the last, and
Yep.
you're 65% better after the year.
Absolutely. I love it. I love to see what you've done. I love to see the strategic moves that you're making. And one thing I think for most entrepreneurs, I love the fact that you're kind of getting yourself out of the business. And 8 weeks is a good test. It was a good test, and I think that you've kind of found it. That's great that you've put on the team and put the team in place to get you there.
Yeah, it was a lot of stress on them, etc. But me and my second in command on the datacom side, and my wife, we all just took a trip to Australia and New Zealand for 4 weeks in February and March, or January and February here this year. And so it's I'd really try to put a big push to get the right processes and procedures. Is one of the reasons we're doing a big ERP transition, is just to create more process and more workflow based performance, rather than just everybody needs to know what they're supposed to do. And again, it's not there yet, but it's coming along. So really, really proud of the team we've got, and excited to see what the next 5 or 10 years go.
When you first started, was everybody calling you, and and then little by little you've started to move away from this?
Yeah. I mean, even 3 years ago, and even some days now, certain contacts at certain clients will call me a ton, but we've got most of those migrated over to calling the group or emailing, shared inboxes, stuff like that. And it really helps just involving more of your team on things. Like if every time if you have a particular customer that calls you all the time, if every time they call, you're like, hey, you know what? Actually, I'm training a new person on this. Let me get them on the line, or let me get them into this meeting. And then they start getting used to that person being there. And next thing you know, you're able to be like, hey, you know what? I can't make that meeting, but Joe, who's been on the last 25 calls, he can make it. He'll take care of you on that. You just got to kind of wean them over. You don't want to do that hard cutoff, because it's as easy for them to call a different customer or a different vendor than it is to call you at that point. But
Absolutely.
weaning them over, involving more of the team. I also find it especially as you grow, involving more of the team kind of shows that they're dealing with more than that one person who's the fixer. Ultimately, it really shows that the company is able to support them more so than that person is able to support them, which is, I think, really keen when you start growing and you start needing to have that ability to have more coverage, and also showing the customer that, hey, they don't work with Tom, they work with Wingman.
Yep.
That there is a difference.
That's a constant for me.
Yeah.
I want my my team is great, and they are the people that get it done. But the customers, because they know me for years, and they've seen me and they talk to me, they don't realize behind the scenes of who's making it happen. But I give them I always say to the customers, I love the fact that you think I can do all this stuff, but you know, I'm one person. You know, if I'm talking to you for a half hour, that means I'm not doing that. You know, so it's very
Yep.
funny. But I strive to get where you are and what you've developed. You know, I have a team of 20, and you know, I'm out of a lot of day to day, but I'm still in a number of day to day. And you know, this podcast kind of helped me. Because again, a couple of hours a week, I'm interviewing other entrepreneurs. So,
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not in the day to day on those hours, but like, it's always my goal and, an aspiration for more of the team to kind of be the lead on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the more you can just bring them in and kind of shepherd them along and, get the customer to see you guys eventually as equals. I think I still call you up to BS. I still have vendors and customers that just call me up on the drive home or whatever, and they call to BS, and that's fine. I'm good with that. But if they're wanting something done, I'll even straight be like, hey, you want to reach out to so-and-so, or you want to call the office tomorrow, because
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to help you on that. Like,
Exactly. we live in a similar world, my man. That's funny. I love the guys that wait till 6 o'clock because they know everybody else went home, and they're like, "Oh, I just thought I'd get you. I thought I had a quick question for you." So
that's
that's
when you're like,
funny.
hey, I no longer have access to our remote software. I don't know.
That's very funny. I mean, this is cool. This is great stuff that you're doing. I'm jazzed that we got to have this conversation, and you're an inspiration for all those entrepreneurs that are hustling and growing, because not a lot of guys can make it to 50 employees to 10 mil. I think that there's very few people that get there. So I'm happy that we got to have this chat, and I hope that people get to listen to this and really kind of take some of this. You gave out some great wisdom today.
Well, I appreciate it, Tom. Thank you again for having me on.
Yep.
Really, really appreciate it, and look forward to chatting again here in the future and following your story. I mean, 20 people is nothing to slouch at. That's way bigger than the average IT company these days, and that's a lot of work, especially up in a market like Jersey.
I appreciate that. And before I let you go, I know you got to get back to it, but just if you could tell the listeners where they can find you online on your social medias, just so if they want to connect.
Absolutely. Yeah. So on Instagram, we're Instagram/Sprinter.com, Sprinter Business Solutions on Facebook, on LinkedIn, Chris Tiffany on LinkedIn, as well as on Facebook. Facebook's .com/Chris, aka Kitty, Kitty. It's a nickname. I'll tell you about it a different time. And we've got on all the socials there. So I don't post much to TikTok these days, but try to stay up on some stuff on the rest of it. So definitely look me up, add me on LinkedIn, add me on Facebook. Love to connect, and love to chat and offer any help I can to the other folks that are just trying to get through and build their empire. So
I love it.
really,
You were a great guest, and I look forward to catching up with you soon.
sounds good. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.